And so our error has been, we focused far too much to deform the theater of democracy, and we haven't actually tried to focus on the substance.
To close the case for side proposition, I call on Professor Stefan Dercon.
So, look, I teach here at this university, and the first thing I tell students when they ask me, how did I do well in an exam? And I say, please read the question. And I will put it actually, dare I say, both on my side and the other side, please read the question. We have a motion, and let's answer the question. The motion is not, is liberal democracy a great thing? Is it a good idea? Is it a wonderful thing? Is the Enlightenment an amazing thing that has achieved? But it asks something about, has it failed a group of countries? And the failure, I would then define, not in some kind of, oh well, but it never was there. No, no, look, there has been definitely a move over time in history that a number of countries proposed it. This sounds like a good idea for you. So I want to actually put to you that the motion is about, is the way liberal democracy is being put forward, implemented. Has it failed the Global South? And I can only, as an academic, when I look at the evidence, evidence matters. If I look at the evidence, I can only say, well, yes, it has failed the Global South, and I will build this up. And the reason why I want to focus on its failure, because what do we mean by failure? Okay, I will use a definition, but it's close, it's within the exam question. I will say failure I will define if it doesn't fulfill the promise by which it was offered, and that promise is for better lives for the population of the Global South. And it's in that sense I want to answer this question. Now look, this is an uncomfortable reality for me. Like many of you, liberal democracy has served me incredibly well. It's also an uncomfortable thing for me because, you know, I used to be a UK civil servant. I was the chief economist of the aid agency here in DFID before someone decided it's a bad idea and we abolish it. But anyway, we're working in this thing. And the one thing I have to say, as working for the UK government, this was arguably our main export product. The one that we proposed all the time, and we had to make it part of what we offered. Democracy is our export product, and we've been trying to export it ever since the end of empire. Now, it's uncomfortable because I was in that system, and I had to go and sometimes meet ministers and say, you should do better on these things, and that's fine. But it was our one, and I want to use in the way it was used also in the system, empirically, not in some kind of idealized way, but how we empirically would also go to places and tell them how to think about it and so on and improve. Now, for me, I'm an economist. Now, what does an economist do here about it? Well, I would want to talk about some things that some already have alluded to, which is some kind of evidence around the success of that exported democracy in terms of growth and development in the Global South. So when exporting it, we have often, and I had to do it as well, we have often exported on the promise that it will deliver economic growth, and on the promise that it will deliver poverty reduction and much better lives for the ordinary people. Now, by the way, I'm not going to go and argue about free trade or not. I don't think that's liberal democracy, but that's about reading the exam question. Now, I want to focus on what we were exporting, and arguably, as Ambassador Volker alluded to, it's about a system, a way of organizing. But not a theoretical system, an idealized system that we read here when we do PPE, but in the system as we export it, and we'll tick the box when it's exported. And then it's said that it's good for economic growth, because it will stop the alternative few people capturing power, kleptocracies, and so on. It's also said that it really is a guarantee, this kind of checks and balance on poverty. So it will be good for the poor and marginalized, rather than leading to exclusion and impoverishment. So, okay, what's the evidence then? Okay, so, look, I have to live by the evidence, and again, not about the idealized forms, but if I read the literature, and I did actually go and read the literature, the research, and what the evidence tells us, it's a fairly simple thing. When political scientists divide the world up, not because of some idealized thing, but these are democracies, these are autocracies, and we look at all the data going back to 1800, and we look at all countries in the world on which we begin to have data, 10-year periods, and we ask what is the correlation between democracy or not with economic growth. Well, some suggest that it was in a particular way. I don't know whether General Park was a Democrat, but that's another matter in South Korea. But the point here is that the evidence tells us that the correlation is zero. There is no statistical relationship between economic growth and democracy as political scientists would define it in the empirical data. Now, it doesn't mean that autocracies do better, because the alternative, of course, is also zero. What does it tell us about poverty? Okay, the data don't go back to 1800, unfortunately, but we have a lot of good data since 1990. And then if we see, actually, this is a world that has incredibly improved global poverty. Global poverty is being reduced by 2/3 by the World Bank definition of around 2 billion in 1990 to about 650 million today in the world. Amazing, the largest, the fastest poverty reduction. What's the correlation with democracy? Well, it's an uncomfortable one, because about 700 million of this decline is in China. Now it gets very hard then to end up, if you start dotting it up, that democracies will win here. In fact, at best the correlation is zero again, or probably a little bit in favor, but that's a China effect. Now, I'm not going to try to stand here defending China, that's not what the motion is. But I'm asked here, has democracy succeeded in one of its main promises, improve the lives of poor people, or create economic growth? I have to say, well, it hasn't, because there's a zero effect. There is no relationship with it. Now, you have to then ask yourself, why is that the case? Now, you know, lots of people have made very good arguments, but I still go on the empirical export product. Democracy as it was exported, in its perfections or imperfections. And if I look at it, well, the evidence tells us it ended up in a particular way. And so, why is there no correlation? Well, because, you know, if you look at the world, say on reductions in global poverty in this period, yeah, you got an Ethiopia, which was not a democracy, but actually managing to halve its extreme poverty. But you also got an autocracy like Kabila's Congo, where extreme poverty doubled, the number of people doubled. But actually, if you go and look at democracies similarly in the global south, Ghana, actually, it halved the extreme poverty during its period of democratization. Great. But Malawi, tick box democracy, it actually doubled its extreme poverty. So again, the relationship is not there. You have to ask yourself, you know, why is this the case? And I think the main thing is that the export we've done was form over substance. You know, I used to work in the Foreign Office. The only time we ever got interested in Malawi is when there were elections. Now, surely, Ambassador Frieden was trying to turn the exam question up and down and turn it all around, but he was... Yes. But, you know, he has to admit that Malawi, you know, places like that, we only take attention when there's elections, when the form is there over substance. So, and I want to quickly make the a key point here. The problem is a little bit, it's like something in nature. You know, there are frogs that are poisonous and they look in a particular way in the rainforest. And you also have frogs that through evolution look as if they are poisonous, but they're not. But they look exactly the same. So we have plenty of places that we have ticked the box that are democracies, and of course they're not doing it. But in that sense, our export product democracy has failed. Because it allows all kinds of frogs to emerge that actually are not poisonous, just look like it. You know, and I've seen from a bird, we won't eat either of them because they're both, you worry about them. And so that's something they call isomorphic mimicry. And so it's a bit like what we've done with democracy. We've exported form over any substance. Now I have to hurry here. And I want to just emphasize that the kind of schemes and the structures we developed, democracies as we allowed it to say this is good enough, most of the time they become places where those people with money, with power, can actually manipulate the system. And so actually the form we've exported did not deliver, even though we think all the time that that's the most important part of it. And so our error has been, we focused far too much to the form, the theater of democracy, and we haven't actually tried to focus on the substance. But in that sense, our export product, that all our embassies were exporting and insisting and encouraging and supporting that we should do, is basically like the non-poisonous frog. It looks like a frog that's poisonous, but it isn't, and it doesn't deliver anything. So we have offered liberal democracy as if it would deliver this progress for people. We settled on exporting that form without thinking what is needed to actually make it work. Now, as a result, we failed the global south because we have allowed powerful people in these countries to capture this system, and we've allowed this to happen. We complained and we threatened and whatever, but we allowed it. Malawi, the UK has given probably well over several billion, 3-4 billion of aid since 1960. Nothing ever changes there. You know, but it ticks the box, and we can do it. So again, there's no correlation between growth or poverty reduction and the system that seems to empirically establish itself. And I think in this sense, it's a lot to do, of course, what people do with the power they get. But the system that we have exported is by no means guaranteeing that people will act in the interest of the people of the country. So we should be willing to say that all this push for democracy has, in that sense, the global south. So if you want to vote based on evidence and not some kind of illusion or idea, I think you have to join us in voting in favor of this proposition.